this is the last-ish session of the Searching for God series. Super excited to bring this into the landing strip. We'll do introductions, but we'll also talk about the book and how you can get it. So I'll start with myself. I'm Holly. I'm always here. I'm a teacher and a co-founder here at Study with Friends. I have 2 kids. They're both in college, and I've been married for a long, long time. I think more than 25 years. But I'm sorry, I don't do that math that very quickly. A long time. There comes a point where you're just like, a long time. Andrea.
Hello, I'm Andrea. I am on the board here at Study with Friends, so I have listened to some of these series leading up to today, but I'll be full disclosure, I did not read the whole Searching for God book. I didn't read any of the Searching for God book, to be completely honest with you.
It's okay.
And it's there. It's out there.
That's going to be useful. That's going to be useful.
So I'm just full disclosure. Might as well put it all out there, right? Mom of 2 little boys, 9 and 11.
Yeah, not so little anymore.
Caroline and I were just talking about that. We met each other like 10 years ago.
MOPS.
And yeah, MOPS. That's when I kind of started my journey into Christianity, my re-journey back into it. I've been attending a Presbyterian church now. And I'm just excited to be here and dive into this. I love apologetics. I love these kind of topics. I know a lot of people shy away from the hard conversations. Holly likes that about me because
I do.
I dive right into them, and I'm not afraid to.
I think that's what drew us to each other into such a good friendship right away, because we were both like, let's hit this head on.
Yeah.
I love it.
Me too. I might not know the answers, but
None of us have all the answers, but it's really good to have the conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm Caroline. I am also on the board for Study with Friends, newly minted. I am actually the person that schedules the series so that folks can listen to it. So I have been following along because I have to. I have to.
You guys make it really
otherwise
sound great.
Yeah. No, and it's this one has just grabbed me for multiple reasons. Probably primary because I was raised Catholic. I've actually, I guess I consider myself church shopping, but I actually reconnected with my Catholicism during Advent, and apologetics is definitely something I shy away from, for sure. I'm not a huge fan of conflict. And yet I find this whole study intriguing because Christianity in general, there's that apologetics, but there's some differences between Catholicism and it's
Protestantism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it is something that I face frequently. So there's that.
That's often how it is.
Yeah.
People challenge us, and that's what deepens our faith.
Right. Mm-hmm. I've married over 20 years, 21.
You had more time to do that math.
I did. Well, I just had the 20th too. So
gosh,
that was
good for you guys.
So that we'll be 21, 3 teenage boys, 19, 17, 14.
And yet you sit here with all marbles intact.
No.
You have good kids.
They're good. Yeah. They're good.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. I'm a full-time college student that's graduating in May. Scary. Exciting and scary. I would also say that I am also church shopping, but when I'm not, I attend a non-denominational church, and I think that I was on one of these, like one of the parts of the earlier in the series.
Yeah, well, that you were.
Okay.
So that, it's interesting. We did dealing with doubt.
Yeah, okay.
Which was sort of a precursor to this. We've just been trying to weave into the Bible studies that we do some equipping in the area of doubts and questions. And that was a large part due to this young lady on my left. What else do you want to do on your intro? You feel properly introduced?
A little more. I also have not read any of the.
Oh my gosh, you guys, you're spilling all the tea. It's actually, I said that it was okay if you didn't. I think it's okay if you don't. I think that it partners well with the Bible study. I mean, with the study that we're doing here on Study with Friends. Obviously, we're using principles and equipping that comes from the book. Just like anything else, if you read the book and watch the video series that comes with the book, you're going to have more information and more equipping. So it's all about the level of depth that a person wants to dive. So it's okay. And we hope and try to make it so that these videos sort of stand on their own. So if you're only watching or only listening on the podcast, you're going to get a lot out of it. So it's all good.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in today.
Yeah, I missed seeing you. I talked to Gianna last night. She was like, Kate's so excited to come see you. And that made me feel really good. Gianna is my daughter and Kate is her best friend. Okay. So, and Gianna's at college and Kate came anyway, which I love. So I was saying this before we mic'd up. And then I said, wait, should I just wait and tell all the people what I'm telling you? So what we're doing, this is the last bit. We may do 2 sittings. I think it would be good if we could, to be honest, because there's so many questions, but we'll see how it goes. This is the last bit of the series, Searching for God, which is this book, Searching for God, and a video series that goes with it. I was a collaborator on this series and blessed to be such. And it's basically, understanding the culture of faith in America for the most part. We're not really dealing with other countries. This is really a study on American culture and the competing ideas that have sort of come up against Christianity, some of the cultural factors that have caused a decline in the acceptance of Christianity. So there's a lot about that in the book, a lot about that in the video series that goes with this book. It's also called Searching for God. And so we've done on our Study with Friends series, series, episodes, that's a better word. We have been working through sort of the principles in this book. And then I have been weaving in really my approach to difficult conversations. And I heard you say a minute ago, you're not a big fan of conflict. And I wrote that down because one of the things that I would love for us to take away is getting into an argument is not the move. Like allowing it to be a conflict is not the move. If you want to be a trustworthy witness for Christ, we have to be peacemakers first. Mm-hmm. And so we'll talk about that principle and how it impacts and exerts itself on a good strategy for apologetics. And just quickly to define what apologetics are, it's a fancy word for saying how we defend our faith. And so we looked at several things. I'm going to go over them with you now. And I do want you guys to try to take it in. Let's be the audience, be representatives of the people who might just be picking this up now. So the first competing idea that we see in American culture is really pervasive is naturalism. And naturalism basically means a person who's a naturalist, who believes in naturalism, really simply just doesn't believe that anything supernatural exists. So it's kind of easy to remember. Natural is the opposite of supernatural. Like if you can taste, touch, feel, experience it with your senses, observe it, measure it, that's natural. And scientists often fall into this, or people who lean on science as their methodology of faith. These are often naturalists. Okay, so that's the first category. And then I'm going to tell you what to do with each of these. Well, I'll tell you now. For naturalists, my approach is typically to begin with the idea that a God is possible. So one of the things that we, I think, unfortunately do in Christianity is we start with an argument from inside the Bible, when the truth of the matter is when you're dealing with people who are seekers and skeptics, they aren't starting within the context of the Bible. They're starting within the context of the culture and ideas that they bring to the table in their own life. And really, in many cases, the Bible's completely foreign to them. So we can't really start with, well, God did this, because especially for a naturalist, often they are atheists. And so you'll see as we approach some questions, if questions like that come up, the way that I sort of walk us through a God is possible and in fact probable. And as we walked through the series, as I walk through this quick overview, this is also the way that I think you have to function when it comes to doing apologetic work. You got to start from big and work your way down. So we know that the resurrection and Christ crucified and raised is the core of our faith. You can't really start there. You have to kind of start with, is there a God? Is it possible? Is it probable? If there is a God, has he revealed himself to us in any meaningful way? If so, what is the most likely way that happened? And you work your way into, I guess I'm using my hands to make some sort of concentric circles, into the core of our faith, which is the resurrection, right? So I think that's an important mindset to keep in mind. Like, we get a little bit jammed up when we see like people in church or a quick video of someone doing street evangelism and someone having a conversion like that, because we think that then the expectation is that we should be able to have a conversation and someone's converted immediately. And that's really not how life typically works. Typically, you're going to work with someone for years and years before, I'm looking at her, we're laughing because she can tell you, but for a long time, to help persuade them and deal with the doubts that they have, and to allow God to use you as a person who loves them and exemplifies faith in their life. That's a process. It's not typically an instant thing. Not typically. God can do, we don't put God in a box. He can do whatever he wants to do. But I think it's good for us as Christians to take that bar away. That like, oh, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I had a chance and I didn't close it, right? It's just, God is looking for our heart. He's not looking for an instant transaction. And so the heart takes a while to be moved, especially depending on how entrenched it is where it already is. Okay, so with naturalism, we're dealing with that big question. We really start with that big question because you can't really talk about miracles or the body and the soul. A lot of atheists believe there is no soul, right? So there's a lot of elements that live inside naturalism. Creation is certainly one of them. I like to start with creation because I think there's a really simple, really cogent argument that you can make that at least makes a person think it's possible there's a God. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a minute.
It's one of my questions I wrote down, actually.
Great. Tee me up, girl. Tee me up. Okay.
I will.
So naturalism is one of the big three that competes in our culture. The second is relativism. Relativism is basically the idea that there is no absolute truth. Now, we as Christians believe that there is absolute truth. We believe that absolute truth can be found in the person and work of Christ, in the Trinity, and the ways that God has revealed himself to us through the world, through natural order like gravity, and also through what we call special revelation, which is his word, the Bible. We believe those things have absolute truth. That's not relative truth. Like, well, it's true for Andrea, but it's not true for me. It is absolute truth. Whether you believe it or not, some things are true. That's what we believe. But not everybody agrees with that. Some people think that truth is relative, and you can define your truth and I can define mine. And we hear the phrase, speak your truth. And that actually came, which is, I affirm that at its core, because I think colloquially, the way that people use that when they say speak your truth, what they really mean is your personal feelings matter. And you shouldn't be, sort of squashed as far as your personal relationships. And it's taken on a little bit of a mental health component when you say speak your truth, but it actually started with this relative truth. Well, you can believe that Jesus is the deity, but I believe that there's another deity, and that's my truth. And I respect your truth, and I need you to respect my truth. And so, our culture has evolved into this place where it's anathema to propose that your belief system is wrong. That's really cancelable. So that's relativism is at the root of people getting canceled because they say you're wrong and I'm right when it comes to faith. And the truth is somebody's got to be right. And we'll talk about that as we talk about pluralism. Okay, so I'm moving now into pluralism. Pluralism, and I'm going to say religious pluralism, because pluralism can take on a lot of great attributes. Like, we love that America is a pluralist society. We have lots of cultures and we have lots of ethnicities, and that's cultural pluralism. So pluralism in and of itself isn't bad, but religious pluralism, these are SAT words, is the idea that we all are basically going to the same place when we die. If you're good, just be good and you'll get to heaven. And it doesn't really matter which God you worship. We're all basically worshiping the same God, and we're all going to go to the same place. So it really ties closely to relativism, because it's that idea that this is, so I'm using you, Caroline, because you're right across from me. Caroline's journey to spirituality is just as valid as mine, your truth, my truth, and we're all going to get to the same place. So that's how relativism and pluralism sort of intersect. And I'm raising these because, not because I think when someone asks you a question, you say, oh, you're a pluralist. In fact, I think most of the time these terms are never going to come up between you and a seeker or a skeptic in conversation. And I don't think they should. But I do think they're important for us to understand, because they're touch points for us. As we hear a person present a question, we can put it in a box. Oh, that question falls in this box. And it helps us to reach into our toolbox and say, this is the tool I need for that particular challenge. So if you're doing a household project and you see a Phillips head screw, you know what tool to reach for. You're not going to reach for a wrench. You're going to reach for a Phillips head screwdriver so that you can do what needs to be done, apply what needs to be applied to that challenge to make what needs to happen, right? So you need to identify what's happening with the situation so that you can reach in and get the proper tool. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the reason I'm sort of laying out naturalism, relativism, and pluralism, and we did a ton of this in the book, and we've done a ton of this in previous episodes. So if you're not getting what you need from this episode, please go back, because we did a lot of foundational building, and we took our time with it, and I'm sort of rushing through it now. The reason I'm giving you these is so that you pretty readily recognize where that question is coming from, and then you reach for the proper tool. Okay. So I talked to you about naturalism and how generally the tool is to try to help someone understand the possibility and probability of a God. In relativism, it's a little bit trickier because, I think all across the board, we have to be really careful not to offend people. And so in relativism, you have to gently assert that they must believe that some things are true. So without being snarky, you could raise things like, listen, whether I believe it or not, if I hold a rock and then I let it go, it's going to fall to earth because gravity is true. And you can ask the Lord to reveal to you the type of truth that would be most meaningful to that person. But if you really get to the core of it, people, my friend Paul Copan, who did the introduction for the book, and he's a great guy, and he has a really great way of saying this. People don't believe in relative truth when it comes to the capital of France or who won the Super Bowl. They only start to assert relative truth when it comes to things that affect their way of living.
Morality.
ethics, a set of rules that they don't want to adhere to. So we'll talk about ways to gently steer someone into seeing that without making them feel like you are on the opposite side. Okay. But I just raise that in a general term before we get started so that we understand where we're going. So relativism being there is no absolute truth. And then you reach into your toolbox and figure out something. If you know they're a football fan, if you know they're whatever, if they like to travel, whatever, you can reach into your toolbox and find a truth that you know they don't think is relative and start with that. Okay, so we'll work through that when we do the questions. And then pluralism is everybody's going to the same place. We all worship basically the same God. And really the truth of the matter is, and I hate to say this, I don't want it to be offensive, but people who assert that are showing a fundamental lack of understanding of the major world religions, because the major world religions have competing truth claims. And so they can't all be valid. God can either be one or three, but he can't be both. So if we have competing truth claims in our different world religions, then how can they all be equally valid? And we'll talk about how to gently sort of raise that. Okay. So speaking of gently raising things, let's see. If I stick with my toolbox analogy and we think about the Phillips head and the wrench and the tools that are in the toolbox, I would say that the toolbox itself, the structure that holds the tools, the thing with the handle, would be for me, disarm and deconstruct. And that's something I'd like us to say and remember just as much as we take hold of the naturalism, relativism, and pluralism, because you reach into the toolbox and you don't want to bring out the tool and then crack them over the head with it. Right. You want to be able to use the tool with the appropriate amount of force. Okay, I'll use the Phillips head thing again, right? So if I use a drill, this has happened to me way too many times because I'm not great with tools. So there's irony. If I have a Phillips head and I put the Phillips head drill in and I just go, I'm stripping it, right? I mean, I'm so easily stripping that, and then I'm in trouble because either I can't get it out, or I can't get it in, or I've stripped that screw because I put too much force on that procedure. And so we want to be able to put the appropriate amount of pressure on the challenge without overusing the strength of our argument. And I truly believe, and I spend a lot of time thinking about what's the right way to do this, and then how can I boil it into something that's punchy. And disarm and deconstruct is intentionally the same letter at the beginning, intentionally just 2 words, because I want it to be something that we can really remember. Disarm being, how can I show this person that I am on their side, that I am not the enemy, that I don't want to get into an argument, and then deconstruct, gently taking apart the argument that they are making and showing them sort of the insides of that argument. Does that make sense? It's always got to be disarm first. If I start by deconstructing, I'm going to hurt their feelings. I'm going to make them feel stupid. I may win the argument, but I'm going to lose the relationship, or I'm going to damage the relationship. And again, Christ calls us to be peacemakers and to be love and to be image bearers of his truth. And we can't really do that by being hurtful. And so these are tricky conversations to get into.
Holly, can I jump in and say something?
Sure.
What's really interesting about that, and this is how you and I think, became close, because right before actually, Holly and I met, I was in MOPS. Caroline mentioned that before, which is Mothers of Preschoolers. It takes place typically out of a at church. It doesn't matter necessarily the denomination. And there was another leader. She was actually on the leadership board of this group, and she knew where I stood as far as really I was just a mom looking for some, fellowship and socialization. I wasn't seeking to get my relationship closer with Christ or anything like that, or even know what I believed at that time. And she was like super evangelist. Like she was like, this is the only way. This is the right way. You're wrong. This is it. Like it was her intentions, I think were good. I'm not 100% sold on it because it put such a bad taste in my mouth because of not doing exactly what you were just talking about making it you feel like bad almost about what you believe, that you're wrong and that they're right. So I see such value. So every time, I've heard you talk about this several times, but I just think for someone who's hearing this for the first time, it's actually super important. Probably one of the most important arguments that I can make towards this whole series is that really taking the time to build the relationship, nurture the relationship, and trust that God has a plan of really like softening that person's heart over time and figuring out like how to let that person feel that you're not the enemy and that you're really just trying to, be friends with them and have a relationship with them without necessarily having the alternative, an ulterior motive of converting them.
Or like a notch on your belt of like, I did this thing.
But I think that's probably, the foundation for many, if not most people's, I don't know, what's the word? Turned offness, to faith in general. I mean, again, coming from Catholicism, 12 years Catholic education, it was, this is it. This is it. This is what you do. Not taking the time to say, well, what do you believe? And why do you believe? And how did you get there? Explain it to me. Because I really don't know. I think I know, but I really don't know. And I do see a trend within the Catholic Church where that dialogue is changing. Like that dialogue is occurring, where there's just honest to goodness, curiosity and openness
And a validation of
and
like,
let's
we
talk
are
about
all,
it. Right.
we all have doubts.
Right. Oh, for sure. But like, Trinity or the Eucharist, the Holy Eucharist. Catholics asking other Catholics, do you know why we believe that? There's a practice. I think it's changing. It's a good change.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the culture has forced it. And I think it's wise when the church responds. I appreciate you guys saying that. That's probably as important as the other foundations we're trying to set here. Do you have any comment on that?
Oh, I do. I think, do we do like a Why Do You Believe series?
Basically that's what this is. But I often talk about the book, Know Why You Believe. And I think I probably gave you that book.
I have it with me today.
Oh, I know I gave her that book. I buy it in packs of 10. I do. And I give it out like candy because it's a really good book. It's a really handy, you don't have to read it chronologically and you can just look up a question. It's the chapters are the questions and you can just dive into the questions that matter the most to you. So I give it away a lot because, I can't do all the work.
If you have a copy
I do. I have a multiple of 10, I'm sure.
And also a copy of this too.
Yes, you can take that one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I think coming from Caroline's approach with Catholicism, the Christian school that I went to had the same thing where we didn't really address doubts, and that's why I liked why we did the Dealing with Doubt series. And I think I mentioned in that series the school and just kind of how I had a lot of questions and I had a lot of doubts and I felt afraid to bring those up because nobody else was asking them. And I think also I thought that they expected us to know the answers to that. So I was like, oh, this is going to be really embarrassing if I ask this. And then everyone else is like, you don't know that?
Yeah.
So I think, and I haven't been there since I've graduated really. So I think hopefully that they've incorporated letting the students ask questions about the doubts that they have and bringing them to light because I know everyone had like
You
the
know,
same
I'm going to
doubts.
tell you a secret. Secretly, I wished to myself that I had time because I have such a love for that school and the people in it. And secretly, I wished to myself that I had time to go down and do an apologetics class at that school.
would be really
Not
good.
that they would let me. Why would they? But because especially in the high school, that is when you're really starting to synthesize what I've learned and how it plays out on the hot pavement of life. And I love those conversations. Man, I love it. I mean, anytime either of my girls we would have lots of conversations in this house with my girls and their groups of friends. And like youth group, I did sat with them a lot. Like that's when kids are thinking about it. And you got to make it a safe place. You got to make the church world, Christian school, youth group, church, Bible study, Sunday school. We've got to normalize the conversation about doubt. And why do we believe this? We have to normalize it. And we're just doing our tiny little part to try to make that happen here. Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible. And so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.